Hi, I'm Birgit O'Connor, and welcome to my studio. Today I'd like to show you how to create smooth, even, clean washes. This is a universal technique that I apply to both my landscapes and my florals. In my landscapes, I consider the skies like giant petals, so you'll be able to see how I apply that technique to both. We're going to work on how to mix colors directly on the paper, value changes, how to keep your colors clean, lifting up any loose hairs in the middle of your wash, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with this. So, let's begin. The best way to begin is to create a color chart. This is going to visually help you see and remember the color combinations. Working my way around my palette, this will help me create the color combinations. I'm going to use a little Hansa yellow, ultramarine blue, create the green, and so on. Don't forget to label these colors as you go along. This will visually help you remember the color combinations. Take your time and have fun with this because this will help you remember how to keep your colors clean. After you've played with color combinations, let's create a value grid. This is important to help you understand the value changes that occur as you add more water. Here I've cut a 2-inch piece of scrap paper. I'm going to use this as my guide. Now I'll create my grid. Using French ultramarine blue as my base color, I'm going to add a stroke into the bottom of each square. Then I'll label it. In your palette you have many colors to choose from. These are just a few. Now using Hansa yellow, I'm going to add another stroke on top of my ultramarine blue and label that also. Now I'm going to take both colors and mix them on my palette to create this green. Now that I've found the consistency I want, I'm going to apply it to the first square. After I'm done with this, I'm going to add more water to the same color combination and then add it to the second square. Then again, more water to the third square. Here you can see the value changes, how the color is starting to lighten with more water. In the next row, I'll repeat the process using burnt sienna. Again, mixing the colors on my palette and then adding more water to my color combination. And here we can see the lightening of the values. Play around with your colors and experiment. This is a very good visual exercise. Creating a value grid will serve two purposes. It's going to help you understand what happens to your colors if you add more water, and also what happens if you have a clean water wash and you want to blend your colors. Speaking of blending, let's experiment. I'm going to use my 2-inch scrap piece of paper and create long rectangles. Instead of a grid, this will be test strips. I always like to work within some kind of form. This helps to give me a vehicle for expression. I don't always have to render exactly what I'm seeing. There's no judgment. It's about getting to know your materials, having fun and playing, to see how color moves within water. In watercolor, you don't always have control over your medium. The best thing is to learn how to let go and enjoy the accidents. After I've created the outline for my test strips, I can go in to the first one and fill it with clean water. Now using a little French ultramarine blue, I'm going to apply a little color to the lower left-hand corner and see how it flows into the water. For my second color, I'm going to use a little burnt sienna. These are great colors together, so it'll be interesting to see how they mix on the paper. Now for a third color, I'm going to add a little purple matter. If I want my colors to blend better, all I have to do is add more water. To create a smoother blended effect, I'll lift my paper up and move it around. Then I'm going to repeat the same idea. In the second row, I'm going to use my Cosmos number 30 and put a clean water wash in the entire rectangle. Then using a number 8 brush, I'm going to go in and add a little new gamboge. And my pigments are a little dry, so I'm going to go in and spray them a little bit with a light mist from a small water bottle. I'm going to go in with a little purple matter, and I want to mix that into my new gamboge. Again, I'm creating a wet into wet effect. This is like a mini wash, and like I said before, it's going to help show you how the colors mix on the paper, wet into wet, and it's like a baby petal. Again, I'm going to move my paper around so you can see how the pigments can flow into each other. In the third row, I'm going to repeat the process with clean water, and as you can see, the second row is puddling on the lower right-hand corner, so I'm going to allow the corners to touch. This is going to serve two purposes. It's going to show, again, the wet into wet, plus it'll help show me another value change. I love the wet into wet. This is the magic of watercolor. For fun, in this puddle I'm going to add a little violet. So you're going to see how it backwashes into itself and the contrasting colors. See how it flows and blends. And in this lower row, I'm not going to add any extra pigments. I'm just going to allow the colors to spill into the bottom layers. In this next example, I'm going to do the same process. I'll create my rows, then a clean water wash, and then using the same exact colors, I'm going to mix that into the clean water. This is a different kind of paper that I'll be using this time. This is called Schuler Hammers of the Americas. It has a different painting surface, so it'll be interesting to see how the paints mix and blend onto this paper. This is neither a hot or a cold press paper. The manufacturer calls this painting surface a torsion. Torsion is what's described as the way the paper is settled during the manufacturing process. As the pigments mix and blend, they have a different kind of grainier look to them. Paper surfaces are going to completely affect your paintings. It's important to kind of experiment and see which paper is best suited for you. Now on another piece of Schuler Hammers, I'm going to show you the same technique, but on a larger scale. Now I'm going to use a little ultramarine blue and a little burnt sienna and allow them to mix into the clean water. And as the pigment settles, you're going to be able to see more of the paper surface. Here my little Schuler Hammer test strips are starting to dry, and as you can see, they're puddling a little. So to help get rid of the excess water, all I have to do is clean off the tip of my brush and go in and soak it up. Now, using a different technique but the same idea, I'm going to use a dry paper surface and a loaded brush using the same colors, the French ultramarine blue and the little burnt sienna. I'm going to apply that directly to the paper. This is another way to get a good color saturation. The only problem with this is that you have to paint fairly quickly if you want an even look to it. I can't emphasize enough how important paper surfaces are. It's critical to your paintings. If one technique is not working on one type of paper, go ahead and try the same type of technique on another. This includes all the manufacturers: Winsor Newton, Lana Carell, Arches, any other kind, Fabriano, any other kind of paper that you have or know of, even the inexpensive brands. I've seen some fabulous paintings come out from some very low quality papers. The only problem with those papers is that the fiber content is not archival. If you're frustrated with one type of paper, try another one. Now, using another piece of Arches paper, I'm going to show you how to create a larger wash. Let's take a look at my dried test strips here. As you can see, the pigments always dry lighter. Notice that you're still able to see the spilling effects after it's completely dry. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using a bamboo hake brush. It's very inexpensive and you should be able to get one at your local art store. These brushes hold large amounts of water. This is a Robert Simmons Skyflow brush. It holds adequate amounts of water and creates wonderful, even washes. Here's a higher quality hake brush, meaning the manufacturing process is tighter and it's less likely to lose hairs. I think it holds adequate amounts of water, but I still prefer the inexpensive bamboo hake brush. As you can see here, how easily the hairs come out and fall onto the paper. Notice the bristles on the Skyflow, how soft and smooth they are. And then again, the other hake, the hairs are less likely to come out. Another nice thing about the bamboo hake brush is that you're able to break it apart and make a smaller one if you'd like. Wiping off all the excess hairs, if there are any remaining while I do my wash, I'll show you how to lift them out. Okay, now I'm going to take my bamboo hake brush and I'm going to dip it into my clean water. Then I'm going to saturate the entire surface of my paper. Now, using a number 14 brush, I'm going to go in and add a little color. What I'd like you to notice is how I mix my water and pigment on my palette. By having an adequate amount of water mixing in with your colors, it's going to flow easier onto your clean water wash. It's important to play with watercolor. Have fun with it. The freedom and the movement is what watercolor is all about. You might think my brushstrokes are a little wild and random, but I can easily blend these out by just the movement of my paper. You might think this is only a scrap piece of paper, but it's actually an exercise to show you how much water I use when I apply it to a painting. I can even mix my colors directly on the paper. By having all this water, they can flow and blend easily into each other. As I showed you on the test strips, this is the same idea, only working a little larger. You can see by using the hake brush and adding large amounts of water, I'm able to apply the color freely. If I want to work on a 22 by 30 sheet of Arches paper, it's the same idea again. Hake brush, large amounts of water, pigment, let the paint move. Now I've found one of those invisible hairs. They don't seem to show up until after you've created a wash sometimes. The best way to get them out is to take a smaller, fine-tip brush, make sure it's clean, dry off the excess water, and then gently lift it out. So now this gives you an idea of how to create a clean, even wash. If you feel that your color saturation is too intense, you can always go back over that with clean water. Here I'm going to be using my bamboo hake brush. You can go back in with a Robert Simmons. As I said, the hairs on the Robert Simmons are really soft and will create a very smooth effect. Now that I've added my water, I can go back in and lift my paper up again, and this is going to even out any brush strokes. Here you can see the smooth effect. Here I'm going to add a saturation of ultramarine blue, and I'm going to lift my paper up, and you can see how it flows back down. This should give you an idea of how much water I use when I create my washes. This is a universal technique. I apply it to all my landscapes and florals. To keep the flow even, constantly keep your paper moving. You can also place your paper at an angle and the pigments will settle at the bottom. Let's just experiment here. I'm going to add a little new gamboge. Watch it start to settle into the purple matter. This effect would create a beautiful sunrise. The mixing of the colors on the paper creates an even flow. You'll need to experiment with different amounts of water and the movement of your paper. When I create a floral, I use the same process. I work one petal at a time, create a wash, and let it flow. Then after that one petal is dry, I can go on to the next. As you can see, I'm making quite a mess, so I need to wipe up the excess water. Now I'd like to show you how I applied the same technique to some of my paintings. Here you can see the beautiful atmospheric effects. On this painting, I used Arch's 300-pound cold press paper. I can always go back in and work on details after I've created my washes. Using the same process, you can see the gradation in the sky. If I look at my test strips, this gives me an idea how the colors will flow and blend. Going back to the graph that we did in the beginning, you can see the gradation in the colors. How it's applied the darker colors into the light by adding more water. You can also see how I applied the same idea, the darker colors into the light, into the landscape, the gradation of the values. For this final landscape, I used Schuler-Hammers of the Americas paper. You can see the vibrancy in the color and how the test strips here had really helped me get an idea of how to handle this paper surface. Now let me show you how I've applied the same techniques to my florals. Here it is, working just on a little bit of a different kind of scale. Same wet into wet technique, but just in contained areas. And experiment with different kinds of paper and see which one best suits you. Here you can notice the contrasting background and how it also helps to create depth. Remember the value grid we did in the beginning. This will also help to show you how the colors change with the amount of water. Look within the shadows and find the different colors. I can't emphasize enough how test strips really help you to see the changes. Now let's take a look at how I would apply this to a petal. It's the same idea, only working one petal at a time. I've created my clean water wash, then applying my pigments and allowing them to blend. To make it more interesting, I'm going to go in and add some other colors. Again, let them blend and mix on the paper. Remember, when they dry, they're going to dry a little lighter. And if I want to make it a little smoother, I'll lift my paper up and move it around. Now I allow it to dry. And when it's completely dry, I can go into my next petal and then work my way around my flower. Now let's take a look at how I would approach a more complicated composition. It's the same idea, just many areas. You can see the value change and how it bends this petal back. By increasing the density of the color, I can help use that to create my shadows. Now let's create some texture. Using my bamboo hake brush, I'm going to flood the surface. I'll mix my colors on my palette with large amounts of water. Then I'll apply it to my clean water wash and allow it to flow. I'm going to mix some colors in and allow them to blend and flow into each other on the paper. Then again, lift my paper up, move it around, and help the colors fold and easily blend into each other. If I have too much water, I can again go in with a clean brush and help soak up the excess pigment. This is going to be a wonderful technique to show you how to create succulents or any other kind of textured surface. Here you're really able to see how much water I'm using. And to make it more interesting, I'm going to go ahead and add a little different color into this mixture. This is going to help create a more mottled effect, more natural. With the large amounts of water that are puddling here, I can go ahead and just easily let it go off into my palette. Remember, if you're working in a contained area, use your brush to soak up the excess water. So now I'm going to wipe off the surface so I don't have any excess water to backwash into my paper. And for fun, I'm going to add even a darker pigment and allow that to blend into this. Notice how many different colors I've applied and it still hasn't turned into mud. It's by lifting the paper up and moving it around and allowing the colors to blend that makes it a smoother effect. Here I can see I have another invisible hair. So I have to go in and lift that out with a clean brush. To help give the illusion of a bend or a fold, I add a darker color. Here I'll apply this to the top of the page, so you're going to be able to see how it contrasts against the lighter values. For a more textured effect, let's play with some color and techniques. Using a smaller brush, I'm going to randomly add some pigments and spatter it in and allow it to blend. This is going to help to break up the paper surface and the color. The pigments are going to push away the colors on the wash. For finer spatters, I can go in and use a toothbrush, holding the tip down and using my thumb to go across it. Now you can see as the paper's drying how the colors have blended into the wash and created a mottled effect. At this stage, I can go in with clean water and spatter that on. This is going to create a blooming effect. It'll be similar to salt. So here I can go and apply this technique also. I put this on the drying paper and the pigments will want to soak up into the salt. When the paper is completely dry, I can go in and shake that off. Let's take a look how I've applied all the techniques that I've showed you to this painting. Using a full sheet of Arches 22 by 30 cold pressed paper, I first of all created my composition, and then working each petal one at a time as an individual wash. Using washes and blending effects, I've created my color. As the colors are drying, I can go back in and spatter the color and the clean water to create the textured effects. Here you can see how I've applied the value changes to my paintings. If you look within the petals, you'll be able to see the spattering effects and how they've blended into the colors. Again, the density of color is built up by layering individual washes after the previous layer is dry. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you found the information that I gave you helpful and that you'll be able to apply it to your own paintings. Whether it's a floral or a landscape, it's about experimenting and having fun, playing with colors and watching it move. Have a nice time and happy painting.